part of the Earglue Media family of podcast.
You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 327? 327, the Skywalker Saga, Attack of the Clones. This is part 2 of 9 episodes that we decided to put together, having the Skywalker Saga finally come to an end. We are kind of doing a retrospective look at all of the movies, talking about the highs, the lows, and doing a deep dive, or somewhat of a deep dive, into our favorite scenes, quotes, and that sort of analysis, brought to you only the way the Cantina Cast can do so. So, with me tonight is somebody you all are very familiar with. He is back again, sporting the loveliest of shirts tonight, a very limited edition Cantina Cast celebration shirt from this year. Please welcome to the show the Dark Lord of Podcasting, executive producer, Mike Rondo.
Yes, hello. This
A
is
shaven
actually
Mike
from last-
Rondo.
Yeah, I look
Less
weird
hairy
tonight.
Mike Rondo.
Yeah, I look weird. I don't know. My camera's a little goofy too.
It's
but
not the
I
camera,
look,
buddy, but keep trying.
No, that's what I'm going with. It's a little weird, and yeah, I got very baby face tonight.
Oh, I like it.
But yeah. This is actually last year's shirt, Albert. This isn't this year.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
You know, technically it's
Technically
over a
it's
year
last year.
now.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a little. This is going to be an interesting show because again, before we went on air, this is almost a disaster yet again. But somehow, under the wire, with 2 minutes to go, we've managed to get the show together. But I am drinking coffee tonight, Albert, to keep me.
Swiss coffee, yeah.
Yes, I needed the energy boost, so I went with the cold brew here because I'm dead tired because of my allergies, which are driving me crazy. So, I'll be drinking the coffee. So if you guys hear any slurping in the background, it's just me. So
Yeah.
I apologize. But
Or it's
but
me.
anyway, yeah.
But,
well,
you know,
that's
no
true.
different
You
than
got
any other
coffee.
show.
Yeah. Well, see, I actually have coffee though. We don't know what's in your mug. So
This is actually coffee, and I will say this: it's got caffeine in it.
really.
Yes, I know it's
My-
crazy. I don't do that
Wow,
often, but I
You
decided
are
to
a
do it.
wild man.
I know.
man.
I'm just living on the edge. I've completely lost.
The pandemic
of-
has changed you.
It
man.
really has. Yeah.
It's changed everybody.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have any news, and I know there's a lot going on in the world, and that was probably partly of it. I think there were a lot of folks that
Yeah.
decided not to release anything or talk about anything. Shows didn't go on the air. We get all that, so we don't have anything to talk about but Attack of the Clones, and that's probably not a bad thing because there's quite a bit to talk about.
Yes.
But we're going to jump into this unless you got something else you want to add here.
No, not really. I'm looking forward to this. When we get into the then and now, it's an interesting. I think like with the Phantom Menace and this especially, they've aged. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it weird, but when we get to that, I think they aged pretty decent. But we'll get to there when we get to that.
But we're going to
that
get to there
moment.
pretty quickly here. So,
Oh, all right. Well,
so let's do this. Let's talk. We started last week's episode talking about what I call the tail of the tape, and this is really kind of breaking down how well it did in the box office. And for this one, so this thing came in at $115 million. So
Yes.
that's on par almost to the penny with what they did with the Phantom Menace, right? So same budgets. In terms of how it did, though, it did significantly less. I mean, Phantom Menace, I think it did almost like 900 million-ish, and this thing pulled in about 653 million. Now, granted, back then, these numbers are still pretty staggering, right? I mean, it's not
Oh,
like
yeah.
this was a big flop by any means, but it definitely underperformed in terms of how well it did compared to the Phantom Menace, which is really not a fair comparison considering we were coming off of, 16 years since,
Yeah.
or 13, was it? How many years was that?
16.
Yeah, 16 years-ish, right?
Yes.
Since Return of the Jedi.
It was a while.
There was a lot of anticipation, a lot of buildup. We talked about that.
Yes.
And the Phantom Menace did well, I think, all things considered. At the time, the critics had their way with it, and we talked about that. But, coming off of the Phantom Menace, there was, again, still some pretty high expectations for this movie, right? I think everybody wanted this movie, especially since we were getting the clones and all of the hype from the first one, and people wanted to see this thing rebound, or a lot of people wanted to see this movie do better than the Phantom Menace. And I mean, and this is where we're going to get into it. I Well, hold on. Before we talk about that,
Okay.
because there's a lot to talk about there, but just tell me your overall experience. Like when this movie came out, was it the same experience for you as The Phantom Menace? Was it different? Did anything change? And this is all off screen, right? Anything going on in your life at that time that was maybe different or felt different about this compared to The Phantom Menace?
Well, yeah, that was some turbulent times with a relationship with my high school sweetheart. So I was still kind of in that whole we love each other, we don't love each other. So my mind was I was a young man. I was confused. I didn't know what was going on.
So similar to marriage, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Just not as tumultuous. No, I'm only kidding. So I kind of latched on to maybe Anakin a bit here, like his character kind of, I guess, spoke
Resonated,
to me.
related?
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. I thought this was worse than the Phantom Menace initially. And there was a few reasons. I don't know. It just didn't. It took a little while for me to get over. And I've said this on the show. And my old co-host had mentioned with the films that the sequels typically do less than like the first one. So it's kind of in a bit of a trend. Like that's kind of what it does anyway. So I never really went into the numbers or anything, but I'm just going by what I recall from our shows and that. So
Yeah.
it's not exactly. I mean, was it a dip? Yeah, but was it bad? No, I mean, 653 million. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, no. So you're saying there was probably some level of expectation that it would not do as well
Yeah,
as the first movie.
yeah, because I think the first movie kind of soured a lot of people. Well, not soured, but kind of like, put the casuals off. Like because casuals make a lot of the money for the Star Wars films, right? So
Yeah.
I think there was a good portion that was like, yeah, I saw the first one, that's good. And that happened even with the sequel trilogy, too. That happened, it wasn't just because of The Last Jedi and all that happened and stuff. It just kind of, that's just the way it goes. I mean, I don't know. But, yeah, this was a rocky one for me. This is the first time, like, The Phantom Menace wasn't bad. I was like, okay, all right, this is the first one. We're getting our feet wet. It had some issues, but it was okay. It was enjoyable.
Right.
This one was more of a struggle. Like this was the first Star Wars film that made me pause and say, "Huh, okay, where you going, George?"
Yeah.
So I don't know. What about you? What were your?
No, I think it was the same way. So the experience was similar. On the last episode, I talked about camping out. That all happened again,
Yeah.
right? We waited in line. We camped out for the movie, and I have no regrets about doing any of that stuff. I still enjoyed the movie, but I
memories.
remember very much like you walking out thinking that wasn't really that great. Now there are plenty of moments that were amazing. In fact, when we get into the quote and scene analysis stuff, I really think it's almost going to feel like I have a different, like a different, completely different, contradicting opinion of
yeah.
it, because there are moments of this movie that are really amazing, and there are moments of it where they really get into the myth and some of the really deep stuff with the Jedi, the Fall of the Jedi, and that kind of thing, which is all really cool stuff. And especially now, so many years later, this is the stuff that we're still holding on to and latching onto when maybe at the time we weren't, right? We didn't see. It was kind of like we were in the forest and couldn't see the trees. This is a perfect example of this. There's plenty of examples in this movie of that. Now, in terms of where I felt coming out of that movie, they could have done better. I don't know, after watching it the first time, that I didn't have an immediate opinion of, boy, the dialogue was really kind of weird. And I say weird, but it was, now looking back, I mean, and I hate to be critical of Star Wars, but I'm going to be critical of Star Wars, and it's nothing that anyone has not heard already. But the dialogue is clunky at times. It is very difficult to listen to some of the lines and the way they're, and I can't tell if it's the lines and the way they were written, the way they were performed, or some combination thereof. Right?
I had a theory on this.
No longer valid, or you still do?
No, I still believe this because what George I think was trying to do was trying to go back to that old style
school.
of acting.
Yeah.
And I've said this numerous times on the show when we talk about the prequels and everything. However, like this is the thing. It's funny because I was thinking of this the other day when I'm thinking about doing show notes and getting ready for the show, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, it would have been easier had he done it with like the original trilogy to get those actors to act wooden, so to speak, like they used to in the oldie time films. because that was closer to then and what the style of acting he wanted. I think this is just my theory. You could completely disagree with me and say, no, Mike, the acting was just horrible.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, all right, you're probably right. But I think George was trying to go for that kind of that romantic, just after silent film kind of, dialogue, so to speak. Like it was kind of blocky, if you will, and kind of a little alien, but kind of like, oh, this is how they would talk in a film kind of type thing. Like, because you hear them say "milady," all that, which is always weird to me. On that, that always like, why did you go there, George? Because like
Yeah.
you try to fit it in, and we don't really get it much in the Clone Wars, the cartoon. Like we don't get it that much. And I think George knew that. He just kind of like, well, I did it, so now I got to kind of live with it, type of thing. But I always thought that was like him trying to capture that style because remember, these are based on things that he grew up with, the serials and
Sure.
Flash Gordon and all that. And the acting, if you looked at it now, you'd be like, oh, that's awful acting. But if you look at like the prequels in that, you'd be like, oh, the acting is kind of in that style. Maybe that's just me and the way I think. I don't know. You could completely disagree, Albert. I don't,
Yeah, no, I
call
can
me
see it.
crazy.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. I think there's some element of that as well. That coupled with, so yeah, right. Is it a combination of the directing? Is it a combination of the acting? Is it a combination
Yeah.
of the writing?
Yeah, I don't think
The
the
answer is
actors,
probably yes.
all of that.
Probably some of that, right? Or all of that. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, because I don't think that, like I said, the original cast probably could have learned that better than like now we're so far removed from that type of style
Yeah.
that modern actors can't grasp like George. I can't act that way. Maybe you can, George, and maybe me. Maybe I could do that, but you
Mhm.
can't do that now because it's just more fast paced. It's more natural, so to speak. Whereas that was more like it's kind of like you like reading the script and you can kind of tell, but you get that dramaticism. I don't know, like the radio dramas and stuff like that. Maybe that's what he was kind of going with. I could be wrong. I don't know, but
Well,
that's Go ahead.
so when people ask me, how do you like Attack of the Clones? And I immediately go to, well, it was great. There's a lot of great stuff in it. I have a problem with like the dialogue and the acting and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And the
Fair
line that
points.
sticks out to me is the line that Dooku says, twice the pride, double the fall. What I
Yes.
mean by that is, and this is probably, I think what we're talking about, the acting, the directing, the writing, to me, from Attack of the Clones, it does feel like that speaks to a larger systemic issue in that there were a lot of people around surrounding George Lucas who
Yes,
didn't
man.
push back. Yeah,
Yeah.
the yes men, right? They didn't
Yeah.
push back. He did heed some of some of the criticism because if you think about Jar Jar Binks' character,
Yeah,
that
he
was toned
muted-
back considerably, right?
Yeah.
But apart from that, I still think he was still operating in this mode of I can do and say and write and direct anything because it's Star Wars and I'm George Lucas. And I think I think this is where it kind of hits that apex because when we get to Revenge of the Sith, I think it's a lot different. I think the writing's better, the acting's
yeah.
better, right? All that, and I don't know. Again, like you, I don't have any proof that says one way or the other this is exactly what happened. This is only my pure conjecture based on being a fan and what I witnessed and heard and watched and how I interpreted all of that at the time. But I think you do have a situation where it felt like we were going into the Attack of the Clones with twice the pride of this is Star Wars and we can do no wrong. And I think that's why it probably fell maybe as hard, if not hard, as harder than arguably any other movie that was released since then, right? And when people,
yeah.
the last thing I'll comment is
Yeah.
historically speaking, traditionally speaking, conventionally, people say that Attack of the Clones is their least favorite or it's down at the bottom in terms of Star Wars movies, and then they'll be quick to say, but they're all great. I love all the movies, right? If I had a top 100, they're in the top 10%, and then it's just a matter of which one I have to. If you have me pick one of them, Attack of the
Yeah.
Clones is going to fall down. It's going to fall to the bottom of that list, and which is fair. Like I said, it's not necessarily a bad movie. There are parts of it that are a little. I'm going to use the word cringy because it can be a little cringy.
Yeah.
There are parts that are a little in terms of awkward, and the pacing can be a little slow at times. I think once it gets to a certain point in the movie, like the hour and 20-minute mark-ish, it picks up. Like the last part of the movie is way different than the first part of the movie as well. So anyway,
Yeah,
those are just
well-
kind of overall thoughts. But
Yeah, but he had to establish. Now, see, one of the things I thought maybe hurts it is because of the time jump, right? Like that
the 10-year
amount of
time
time.
jump.
Yeah, from like Jake to Christian, Hayden. Sorry, I said the wrong. Hayden. It's quite and getting used to another actor playing that role. Like we had Luke straight through, right? And now we're kind of making this jump in the middle of it, and it's like, well, I get why you had to do that because you were a 9-year-old boy at this point. Now you got to be 18 at this point or whatever you were. I get that, but I think that kind of hurt. And I also feel like you're right. The dialogue is hard to get through, and that was one of my things when I first saw it. Because when I saw it, I was like, what, 23 or whatever the hell I was, 24, 25, or whatever the age I was at the time. It's hard to, I can't, math hard. Off the top of my head, you're looking at it when you're a young guy, and you're like, what? This isn't as snappy as like the original trilogy with the dialogue and the sarcasm and the chemistry. And I remember thinking, like, when it came out, I'm like, all right, so George, you're trying to do the familiar thing with the hero group, right? You got Chewbacca, Luke, Leia, and Han, and all that together, but you failed to kind of do that with this group. Like, you didn't have that core group, really. I mean, you had Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme, but we missed one film. Like, it's the second film, and they're kind of just getting introduced as one unit in a sense.
And then we
So I
split them
think-
up throughout most of the movie, if not all the movie.
Exactly. So it's kind of, you don't get that cohesiveness that we did in the original. Maybe I'm seeing that wrong. I don't know, but that's how I felt at the time. I've since my opinions changed about the Attack of the Clones since then. I think it's actually a far better movie than you remember back then. I think it is. I don't know. Maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe it's just I look at it at a different lens now. I don't know.
Yeah,
Which gives me hopes with the sequel trilogy too. Like 5-10 years from now, I could look at it completely different, because this was, and I've said this with the sequel trilogy. The Attack of the Clones was the hard one for me to get over in the prequel era, but I did, and I accept what it is, and I started to enjoy it a little bit more as it got older, and I got older, and I didn't have this pressure of, taking it that serious. I don't know. It's weird, because at the end of the day, it's kind of a fun film, really. It's a mystery, really. It's a mystery film at the end of the day. It's CSI or whatever. But I mean, so if you kind of take that pressure off of, it's Star Wars, it's not that bad. But anyway, go ahead, sir. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I was gonna be talking. Wanted to touch on the acting itself, because there were times when, in watching Hayden Christensen's acting, and he's actually an amazing actor, and I think he does really well in the next movie. And he had moments in this movie where I thought he did awesome. Like, he really came across as the Vader, as this ominous character that would eventually turn into the Dark Lord of the Sith.
Not just the men, but the women and the children.
The women too. Yeah, exactly. And then there was great moments in there. But then you talk about the love scene, which we'll get to in a little bit. That's a real clunky, and I don't know if that's just because they were both really young, and Lucas was asking him to be passionate and show those types of feelings, and Portman was all of what 20 years old, 8. I don't know. She was still pretty young. I mean, she may even been younger than that. She was born 81. So I don't know. Let me
She
do the
was
math
young.
here.
He was young.
They were like 20, 21 years old, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. You're asking a lot of people to be able to kind of express those feelings and kind of deliver lines that are supposed to be really romantic and spark fire and kind of stir up these internal emotions for yourself when they've never gone through it themselves, right? So they're trying to do it vicariously through whatever directing that George Lucas or whatever direction Lucas has given them. So that was a little clunky. But in terms of like Hayden Christensen's acting, there were also times, and this is something that, again, I don't have any science to base this off of. This is just me as a viewer watching. But it did feel like he was doing what Obi-Wan Kenobi was doing in part, and trying to sound and act like Alec Guinness, just like we saw in the Solo movie, the remake, right? There was moments in there where he was trying to act like Harrison Ford. And there were times in here where I felt like he was trying to deliver lines and trying to do the pacing of the lines and the tone of the lines akin to what not David Prowse, but James Earl Jones would do, right?
Yeah.
He was trying to shift his voice that way and say things like that. And some of that kind of worked and some of it didn't. And I think that kind of was lending to some of the clunkiness that I'm talking about as well. I don't know. Again, I could be wrong too.
I can see that. That's fair. I mean, yeah, that's kind of fair. I can see what you're saying. Like, I'd have to go back and watch it now that you said that in my head, and watch it and then be like, yeah, okay, probably. I'm trying to think of some lines where it'd be like, yeah, that's kind of a reach. He probably shouldn't have, But, I mean, again, nobody played Vader other than James Earl Jones and David Prowse. So it's like, how do you kind of got to get the mannerisms down of Prowse in a way. And they kind of did that at times, and other times it was like, all right, we'll just go with the swagger of Solo, or, try to be Luke at some points. Like, he was trying to maybe try too hard to cram a bunch of things into that instead of taking his time with it. I don't know. I mean, again, we went from 9-year-old to 18-year-old, like, in a movie, and then we don't have that. I don't know. It just seemed like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit detached, I guess. Maybe that's the bigger hurdle. I'm not sure. I don't know, but good points.
I saw, and this is the movie itself. I think I saw this as many times, even with the feedback that I had, the criticism that I'm sharing. I remember at the time the movie I saw it as many times as The Phantom Menace, and I
Hmm.
spoke highly of it then as much as I do now. I was very well aware at this time because at this point, the internet was booming. Right, this was
Yeah,
no
yeah.
longer 1999. We were in the great
Oh
midst of
yeah,
the
the thick of
the
it.
boom of the internet, thick of it. So criticism was out there, feedback was out there. I don't know if Rotten Tomatoes was out there at the time, but there were definitely a lot of movie critic type websites that were panning this thing and just slamming it. And I'm thinking to myself as a fan, did we watch the same movie? Because yeah, I had some
Yeah,
fundamental problems with it like this, but at the end of the day, I had a great time. It was like you said, it was a fun movie. It was Star Wars. It felt like Star Wars to me, and that
yeah.
was like the best criticism I could have is it did feel truly like Star Wars, and knowing that it came from somebody like George Lucas, and that this was really this was canon. It was the birth of Anakin Skywalker and who would eventually become Darth Vader. I got to see moments of that in this movie. I got to see the shades. I got to see the buildup. All this stuff was super exciting, and yet you go and you would check online or check the magazines because that was
Oh, it's
kind of
the
a
end
big
of the
thing at the
world.
time. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was the end of
yeah,
the world. Like Star
yeah,
Wars is over.
yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if the criticism is fair and just. I think if you're looking at it from a purely, movie critic lens, film critic lens, I get it, right? There's plenty of things you can nitpick at, tear it apart, bring that score down to 50, 40, whatever you want to bring it down to. But if you look at it from just a pure Star Wars fan perspective and what we got in terms of lore, what we got in terms of, you know, uh, some of the Force canon stuff, some of the all that stuff. Anyways, all of that, I think it really does pay off. I think there's a lot of great stuff, and we're going to break these down here in a minute. That really paid off in the next film, and that have continued to pay off years later. I mean, there's still things we're talking about even today that were brought up in Attack of the Clones, which I think is a great thing.
Well, I maybe it's because George was he was putting these little crumbs, and we just didn't see it at the time.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
then we get Revenge of the Sith, and of course, we get the micro comic that came out, the cartoon, right? That helped a lot back in the day. I love that cartoon, and I used to when I had the videos, I'd put that in between 2 and 3, watch all that, and then move on to the rest, and that was cool. Then, of course, we get the Clone Wars, the one we all know and love
Sure.
quite a bit, and that added to it. And George, a lot of stuff is pulled from that episode, like episode 2. There's a lot that goes on
Right.
there, so it casts a big shadow. I know it has its problems and whatnot, but I think over time it's almost like, as I always said, bad Star Wars is still good Star Wars. It's like having bad
Yeah.
pizza. It's still pretty good.
Right.
This has its charm, and I think this is kind of maybe the difference with the sequel and the prequels is that the sequels don't seem to have any charm, at least to me right now. Like I said, that could change 5 years from now, a month from now, who knows? Um, Although it gave me some of the great moments because of my daughter and everything. But it was still George, and we still he was involved, and we got what he was trying to kind of get at. And I don't know, it had more charm than I think than what we have uh currently. I guess maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I guess that's what gave it its staying power, if you will. So
All right. Well,
yeah.
let's talk about the on-screen stuff then, because I think we've kind of beat the dead horse in terms of off-screen. And I think on screen, I think we're going to find more things that we really liked and loved, especially again when we get into the scene and quote analysis, than the stuff that we didn't care so much for off screen. But let's talk. I want to get the bad stuff out of the way on screen. Let's talk about the controversies at the time. We talked about the bad dialogue. I don't know if there's anything more to say. That again, it was there were definitely consistent performances. I thought Ewan McGregor was amazing. I thought he did a great
Oh yeah,
job.
he's throughout all of everything. So
Right.
yeah.
Getting to see Dooku and Dooku's performance, awesome. I think he was great
Dooku,
throughout.
he was like the next Qui-Gon, but just the bad version of it.
Yeah.
Which I loved about it, and Dooku is one of my favorite characters. Not so much now, but back then, I think once the Clone Wars, the cartoon came out, I kind of like the way I wasn't a fan of how they made him.
In the Clone Wars
Um,
cartoon?
Yeah, in the cartoon, like
Yeah.
in the movies, I liked him. I don't know, but
No,
but
I think
did
you're right.
initially.
I get what you're saying. Like to
Yeah.
me, as much as I love the Clone Wars, I liked him more in the movies than the animated series.
Yeah, because I always took it as him as his whole New World Order. Like he was trying to
Yes.
kill the Jedi and the Sith and change everything. and he just got corrupted. And I think this is why I don't like him so much in the Clone Wars, is because I feel like it robbed of that. Like it became more of a he's more evil kind
Yeah,
of
he's
thing.
more
You
evil.
know?
He's exactly. And he was much more no, I 100% agree. He was much more gray. Like he's in there's moments in this movie and in the next movie where he's not wrong. He's not lying. He's telling the truth. He's telling it like it is. And especially when he gets to that line where he's talking about, he's got Obi-Wan in the stasis field and he's telling him that I wish Qui-Gon was here. I
He means
100% believe him. Right?
Yeah, well, and then it goes even to when he's in the when he says to Master Windu, and he says goodbye, old friend. He hangs his head low, like that's weighing in on
Like
him.
it's sincere. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, he might
like
be a
he
little
doesn't-
crazy, but he's
yeah, but
right.
he doesn't want to do it, but in order to bring balance in his mind, whatever that is, this is what he has to do. And I think he wishes Qui-Gon was there because he would have had the sounding board, and Qui-Gon would have been like, dude, no, this is not the way. And maybe
Right.
saved him. Maybe not. Things would have went a lot of different ways if Qui-Gon didn't die, but that's just the way it is. So
Yeah, we should mention.
Dooku-
I was going to say we should mention that he is, and we talked about this. I think it was in the last episode that Qui-Gon Jinn is the way he is because of Dooku. Right? It all starts with Dooku, which
Yes.
then passes on to Qui-Gon Jinn, which passes on to Obi-Wan Kenobi, to Anakin, to
Anakin,
Ahsoka. Right? I mean, there's a
so
whole lineage there of these people that are kind of reading between the lines and pushing up against the grain and really feeling like something's not right here. Right? And how they react to that is obviously different for all of them, but. Yeah, I thought, and credit to Christopher Lee. I mean, here's a guy who had really done a lot of film, a lot of horror movies throughout, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and
that's an
then
understatement. A lot
Yeah,
of
well,
film.
some really cheesy stuff in there. But he disappears and then comes back, and of course, this is right around the time that Two Towers was out, I think. So he was already killing it, literally on the big screen in other movie franchises. Which, by the way. We didn't mention this, but going back just quickly to the $653 million that this movie pulled in, this didn't finish top movie of the year, right? I think it got beat out by Lord of the Rings, and I think was it Spider-Man? I forget now. There was another movie, anyways. But the point is, Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, I thought was really awesome. And then one of the other controversies that we had at this time was we went from original episode 1, Puppet Yoda. And we jumped into the CGI world, which going into the Phantom Menace, especially leading up into it, the 5-6 years before the Phantom Menace came out, I was fully expecting that we would get a lot of CGI characters, more than we did in episode 1, although there were a fair share, especially with Jar Jar. But going from episode 1 to episode 2, I actually really liked the CGI Yoda more than the puppet Yoda. But there were people that... There was a fence. I mean, there was definitely a distinct line between the fans that didn't like it because we were moving away from the traditional, that's not my Yoda, right? This is not the Yoda that I grew up with. This is a CGI. He looks fake. He looks phony. And you had the other people going, no, this looks great. And how were you going to pull off the last lightsaber battle, right, with Dooku, first off? But let's put that to the side. Let's say you did get past all that. If you go back and look at the puppet Yoda from episode 1, one of the problems I had with it is it didn't look like the Yoda from Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi.
No, and I think that what George was trying to do there was try to get a younger version of him, and it just failed miserably. And he knew that, and he said, well, and he corrected it, because on the other releases, they changed that whole thing. And this is one of those moments where you can argue against practical effects and say, no, this was the way to go. And then, of course... I have to remember when going back to it and remembering going to see it, I didn't expect Yoda to be fighting at all.
Right.
Because I remember when it started, I'm like, are you even serious with going here?
Like, don't spoil it because we're going to talk about that here as one of the highlights.
All right. I'll bite my tongue for that one, but it continues, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually a controversy for anybody that remembers that. Episode 1, Puppet Yoda versus episode 2, CGI Yoda. People were for it. A lot of people were against it. And I think in the end, I think they did right by doing CGI. I would say that given that Frank Oz was still behind the voice, to me, that was still the character. I think they did a really good job of capturing who he was. So all that was just fine. Another controversy. So we got less of Jar Jar, which was probably a good thing for some people, but we got more of C-3PO. And I don't know that we got more of him in a good way.
Good way?
I mean, that whole... So So ahead of this show, I watched this movie 2.5 times. I didn't get to the third. I want to do it 3 times.
Yeah.
The first viewing, and I probably haven't seen this movie in about 4 or 5 months. It's been a while for me, at least from Star Wars movies. So I hadn't seen it in that long. But going back and I watched it, and I just have this like visceral, physical, like, ugh. When those lines come out, when he's in the droid assembly, and my mind starts going, okay, so really you want me to believe that his head goes on a clanker and 2 zaps, and somehow everything's magically connected, and he's now speaking, right? I'm breaking that down now because it bothers me so much, and that never used to bother me. I was just fine. I was like the suspension of disbelief that you could just, interchange droid heads with droid bodies, and everything works just fine by a tap of the bzz, bzz, and you're done. Never used to have a problem with that, but now, like, I've already moved past the idea that the lines are just horrible puns that even as a father, even as a scoutmaster, I would never use because they're just that bad. I mean,
I'm not buying that.
You've heard some pretty bad ones from me. I know.
I'm not buying that, but go ahead. You can say that.
I can say that. You may not believe me, but I think they do cross the line. They're almost offensive. Like, they're just so cheesy, and but I'm saying
this is worse than my Boba Fett thing on last episode.
Probably
is.
Of
the show. Wow,
it probably is. But I've gotten past
this is like therapy for you and I. We bring up our little pet peeves at each one. But continue, sir.
So I've gotten past the cheesiness of the lines, and I think now I'm like trying to find other things that I have a problem with those particular moments in those scenes, and now I'm nitpicking the technical aspects of it. Like, that wouldn't work. You can't just put a protocol droid on top of a a battle droid. It doesn't work that way. And later
you can't
on,
have fire in space, but yet we have that anyway, Albert. I mean, come on, you got to suspend your belief.
All right, so talk me off the ledge here. Am I wrong in saying that this is like one of the lower moments in the movie, or not?
I think he was trying to compensate, like for comedy for Jar Jar. Like he was muting him and adding C-3PO, a familiar character, and kind of giving him.
But did it work? I get it. That's what he was trying to do. I agree there.
Here's what I'll say. I'll say this, and I was going to do the comparison with here now, and we'll get into a little bit more. But I'll just say this: this is my daughter's favorite Star Wars movie. I don't know why, but it is.
Is it because of these lines though, or this scene?
No. It's for other things, but she doesn't have a problem with it. She actually likes C-3PO. I never really cared for C-3PO. He was never my. I'm an R2 guy, man. R2 is the man.
Yeah.
He saves everyone's butt. R2 and I would get along famously. C-3PO would be me and Han Solo. Like, I'd call him Goldenrod. I'd leave him on Hoth. All that stuff. I wouldn't put him back together if he blew up. Well, I would now because, obviously the history and he's Anakin's droid and everything, which that is my beef, actually, is Anakin putting together C-3PO. That, I don't know. I have a problem with that. And then, of course, anyway, we'll save that for another therapy session. But I didn't think it was bad. I remember at the time, like you said, with the thing going on his neck, and then this is such a drag. That was hard. I think that's the biggest blasphemous thing of the whole movie is it's such a drag. But it's all right. I mean, it's Anthony Daniels, C-3PO. I mean, I can't get that mad, right? It's okay.
Right.
I can live with it.
It's still him, right? It's still C-3PO.
Yeah. So
I had another personal issue, and I honestly.
Wow, apparently this is a therapy session.
I don't even remember what it was now. Like, I put these notes in here. I don't remember what this is. We're going to skip that part. It'll probably come to me, and then we'll talk about it, because at the time I was super passionate about it, and I didn't want to spoil it to you, and I apologize to anybody watching and listening. I don't remember what it is. So let's move on. Let's talk about
this. Is right on par with how the Cantina Cast really operates, everybody.
Let's talk about the good stuff now, or I guess the high points here. So like the last episode when we talked about the Phantom Menace, there were a lot of great origins here. So, and this one's a little bit lighter, but we got to see Owen and Beru Lars, even though we'd already seen them in episode 4, getting to see them as young people, maybe too young. I don't know. There's controversy there, but we don't need to get into that in terms of whether or not they were, whether or not they looked the right age for what they look like in episode 4.
Listen,
we chalk it up to the Tatooine sun.
Yeah, that's
just brutal.
Those suns are brutal, man. What do you expect? I mean, we're surprised Luke looked as good as he did when he was 19 or 18.
Yeah,
I mean,
right. A few more years, and he would have looked like Kenobi there from episode 4. Exactly. All right, so we got to see them. That was neat. We talked about Dooku, who turns out to be like one of my favorite characters, right? And a lot of that is obviously from the little that we get in this movie and in part 3.
Yeah.
what we get in the Clone Wars, what we've gotten from the books, and some of that stuff as well. Like Dooku Jedi Lost, right? That was a great one. We got a lot more background and information from him there. It all lines up. So, again, we've already said enough about him, but that was a good origin. The Clone Army itself. I mean, and we're talking about Attack of the Clones. This was our first chance to actually see the clones themselves. We had heard so much about them, right, from episode 4.
My daughter's favorite moment is the Battle of Geonosis.
Yeah.
She loves that. She loves the clones coming in and saving the day. Because she's a big fan of the clones. She loves the clones, and this is like where it starts and all that other stuff. She loves I asked her today before we came on. I said, because we're gonna do the show tonight. I said, well, what's your favorite thing? She said, well, of course, Padme. She loves Padme's white outfit. She wants to do that for Christmas now. I mean, not Christmas, for Halloween. Yeah. And
You
of
can do it
course,
for Christmas too. It's fine.
but she will. She'll wear it all year round. So, but she's learning how to cosplay. Like she's on YouTube learning how to do the hair and everything. Like I don't know. I created a monster.
Wow.
But I think she liked the Battle of Geonosis. She liked the clones. She liked seeing Yoda doing his thing. So there was a lot. Again, she liked the seismic charges, which we'll get into in a minute and stuff. So there's a lot of. She likes Django too. She likes Django more than Boba. So, which a lot of people kind of do now, which is weird.
Really?
But yeah. So
Yeah. Well, that's fair. I mean, Django's got a certain swagger about him that
Yeah.
Boba just was never able to develop or carry.
we never saw it, sir.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I'm going with.
Let's see what other origins we got. We've got Jocasta Nu. No, I'm kidding. That's not. That's
Oh my god.
sorry, I shouldn't have done that to you. No, not Jocasta Nu. Jedi generals, right? So
Yeah.
this was for me one of the ones where and this is a retrospective look. At the time, this just didn't even cross my mind. This isn't something that I would really become to appreciate until the Clone Wars series came out, and didn't really appreciate until, honestly, probably coming onto the show and dissecting all of this and really taking that line of, we're not warriors. We can't, we're peacekeepers. We're not warriors or whatever it is, or soldiers, right? That line never really resonated with me the way it does now. But the idea that these, peacekeepers were thrown in the midst of this clone war and in the midst of this war, and then served as generals and were forced to lead, and then the weight and the toll that took upon them, right, individually, and then collectively as a group. That was really kind of the last, the straw that really broke the camel's back for the Jedi Order. They had already been in this period of peace and period of ignorance and arrogance and all that, and then they get thrown completely. Their world gets turned upside down here, at the behest of somebody like Sidious. It really did them in, and I think that is a pretty cool origin, because if you go back, let's say fast forward to the time of the the New Republic and all that. I think when looking back, if you were to go back and look at this, they would all kind of point to this as being one of the catalysts for the fall of the Jedi Order, right? The fact that they got thrust into the war and that they were asked to become generals and act in that capacity when they didn't really have. It was really against who they were at the time, right?
True, and it's a callback to A New Hope when it says, General Kenobi, you served my father, blah blah blah. Which was nice. It was a good touch. It was. Is that retconning? Some would say yeah. Some would say it's George trying to pigeonhole some stuff in there. But that's Star Wars. That's what we do, right? So yeah, no big deal there. Yeah, it was pretty good. It's just weird to say Jedi General. I just like saying General. Like General Kenobi. That it fits a little bit better, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's just me probably putting the wrong thing in there. The other thing is, and this is very minor, it's very small, but I remember seeing it the very first time I watched the movie and got super excited. I mean, I didn't jump up, but I may have squealed internally. But that was seeing the Death Star.
Oh yeah,
in
I
the
get
background
excited.
there on Geonosis, right? When
Yes.
you can see it, and there's one obvious moment where he, Dooku takes it and says, I'll take these plans to my master where they'll be safe or something like that. But prior to that, in the scene just before, when they show Poggle and he's standing there in the background, faded, it's it's not in focus, right? But you can see it rotating. The Death Star is rotating, and that's when you first see it. And I remember seeing it in the theater that moment, going, I wasn't even paying attention at that point to what Poggle was even talking about. And then when they finally showed him take that little whatever it was,
Yeah,
and
the
you can
little
see the
device.
schematic.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I mean, it was just like the coolest thing in the world. So I love that he was doing that, right? He was trying to really show you all these bits and pieces in the origins, and maybe that changed a little bit with Rogue One, but nonetheless, I did throw it in there as just kind of an Easter egg origin that I thought was really cool.
No, it was really cool. I mean, I remember I was like you. I get excited. I believe that there was a one of those moments like here in the theater, you hear like one of those type
Yeah.
of things. Because I wasn't expecting that either, and then it was there, and I was like, oh, so the Death Star is older than I thought. Like and that was cool at the moment. I remember just thinking, oh, wow, so this goes back even further than I thought. I figured, like it was in between 3 and 4 somewhere. That's where it developed, but no, makes sense, right? You're trying to develop this thing, and something like that, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a
Right.
while.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
Let's see. In no particular order, there's one I do want to throw in here because I forgot to mention it in the show notes, but I want to talk to you about it just quickly because I thought it was a standout
Okay.
moment, and that was seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi fight Jango Fett.
Oh yeah, that's kind of in my.
Well, you've got that
So-
later on.
Yeah.
You want to? You
Oh.
want to just wait? Let's wait to it.
Yeah,
we'll table
wait,
that.
we'll-
We'll come
yeah,
back. We'll
table-
come into it.
table
Let's talk
that.
about Shmi's death.
Yes, dramatic.
So this is one that's going to play into my moments, but I don't want to spoil that either. But we can talk about her death just to begin with, because on the surface, without getting too deep into it, it really, and this is a carryover from the last episode, and what I mentioned, the line that I picked was, what does your heart tell you, right? And the idea that Anakin is really truly following his heart at his mom's advice, and that's kind of what got him into a lot of this trouble. If you pick this up with Shmi's death and the fact that he went on for so long, 10 years, and based on what we know from the movie and what she says, she hasn't seen him in 10 years, and he's not made any effort to go out there. Like, he's really stuck to his Jedi training and, preparing for the trials and following the tutelage of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and is really, I wouldn't say he forgot about his mom, because we know that's certainly not the case, but he's never tried to pursue it. And Shmi dying, first off, I think her death is so significant, and we know now just how significant it is in the way that she died. But it's the moment where he's going after her and he's looking for her, and that kind of that CSI part of it again, right? It's another crime thing. He's
Yeah.
tracking it down, tracking the sand people down. He finally gets in there, and when he gets there and she's kind of on death's bed, almost like she'd been waiting for him, knew that she was gonna, he would be there, and that scene really breaks my heart. It breaks my heart these days more as a parent now than it did, as a punk 20-something-year-old when I watched this movie,
Yeah.
maybe 30, but who's counting? But the reason why is because she's trying. The one thing that gets me in that scene, the one thing that really breaks me down in that scene, is she's trying to say, "I love you." Right?
Mhm.
She keeps saying, I love,"
Yeah.
and she never gets it out.
Yeah.
And the thought that somebody like Anakin had never heard that for almost 10 years, never heard probably anyone say, "I love you" for 10 years, much less his mother, who he loved. And we know how passionate he is. We know how big his heart is. We know that he follows his heart probably more than his mind, first and foremost. That, to me, it just guts me. The fact that he didn't get to hear it, and she was trying to say it. And he probably knew what she was trying to say. And what would he have said in return? Like, had she gotten that line out, I wonder, like, was he just so far into the Jedi training, the suppression of feelings and passion and emotions and all that, would he have been able to say it back to her? And I say that and I question it because later on, Padme says it to him, right? Right before they go out into the little arena, she finally says it, and he's got this look of shock. So he gets somebody that's really close to him in his life saying, "I love you" for the first time in a very long time. It's not his mom, and it's a different kind of love. But he doesn't reciprocate it. He doesn't say it back to Padme. He talks about, "Hey, I thought we weren't going to do this. I thought we weren't going to talk
Yeah.
about this sort of thing." But he never says it back in return. So anyways, that scene, and just again, the way she died, the fact that she was trying to say that, what that did to him, knowing that that's what she was trying to say, how those emotions probably made him feel. And then that is really kind of the start, and this is where my scene in quote stuff is going to come in. That's really the beginning. This is the birth of Darth Vader as we know him. You can argue that prior to that, there were moments, especially when they were chasing down the changeling, right? And he gets
Yeah.
real angry and threatens her. That was kind of a moment where you kind of see him go, get
Padme's apartment.
dark. Yes, Padme's apartment's another one.
But I always thought, were they trying to force that though? But again, you can look at it like he's a young guy. He's, he's more emotion. He's not being stoic, right? He's not controlling the emotions. He's kind of just letting it rip when you're that age. And I was like that too, young when I was like that. I was just like, tell me the bleeping answer, right? Kind of like, or we're gonna figure out what this problem is, because he cares for Padme, obviously, right? Because he's always thought about her.
Yep.
So obviously, he's close to her. His mother he's not close to. So this woman, he kind of projects his mom and all those other things onto her. This is the woman he loves and cares for her and everything. So he's kind of maybe even being even more overprotective and letting those emotions fly when he should be a little bit more in control. Now, I got a question for you though. With Qui-Gon, had he survived, do you think had he survived that they would have wouldn't go and visit his mom every now and then? Maybe they're going to a mission, but they take a little pit stop to Tatooine or whatever just to check on her. And
Yeah.
I
mean,
think
the
so,
answer is
too.
yes. Right.
And I think, and my other question to you is, with Obi-Wan kind of being regimented and not like Qui-Gon, is this why he's like, all right, I kind of screwed up with your mom. I should have took you to go see your mom. And obviously we know from the Clone Wars, he knows about Padme. Is this kind of why he turns a blind eye more to that? Like, he's kind of like, yeah, you know what? I'll let that. Plus his whole thing with Satine as well. Like,
Yeah.
that all plays into it. Like, he's like, well, I kind of got to let Anakin do this because of what I screwed up with his mom. I should have taken him to see his mom. But Obi-Wan admits that he failed and all that other stuff. So I mean, it's just throwing stuff out there.
No, I agree. No, I don't disagree with any of that. I think all of it's
Yeah.
kind of part and parcel. I would have expected Qui-Gon to make a pit stop here and there. I think he would have allowed that to happen, right? To allow that passion to be there, the emotion to exist, because I think he felt it was healthy. If you go back to Master and Apprentice, we know Qui-Gon was very much in favor of, freeing slaves. That was something that was dear to his heart, right? So he would have, I think, and I'd go take one further. I would say they would have rescued her a long time ago, before this had happened, right? I'm sure he would have found a way to figure out whether, against the council's wishes or not, he more than likely would have found a way to go free her sooner rather than later.
I think they would have probably left the order. To be honest, I think they would have left sooner. They all wouldn't have became some kind of a family or whatever, and Obi-Wan still would have been a Jedi maybe. But I don't know.
I don't think that's out of the realm either. I honestly don't.
Because Episode 2 brings a lot of what ifs. You know what I mean? Because of that whole fallout. It's an interesting. Now that you look at it, it's like there's a lot of ways this could have went. But,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. Let's see. There's some of the other quick highlights. So we got the Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Dooku, Anakin versus Dooku, and then Yoda versus Dooku. Those were all great fights. I want to talk about the Yoda one in just a second. We also got the Clone War itself, right? That was kind of the antithesis, the beginning here of everything, which was great. But Yoda as the great warrior, and I use that purposely because he makes that comment in Empire Strikes Back about warriors don't make one great, and yet here he was in whether he liked it or not, whether he wanted to admit it or not, he was a warrior. I would say that by the definition, but. We got some stuff that we weren't expecting. Like Yoda throughout this entire time is walking around with a cane, which I think was great. I thought it was a great design that they did. They used him to kind of show him as this frail character. And then at the very end, I mean, he did surprise everybody. I mean, that was a moment in the theater, nearly every single viewing, that people were cheering at the very end. Leading up to it, when it first happens, you see him pull back.
He does
and then
the lightsaber.
he catches his lightsaber in his hand, right, with using telekinesis.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the crowd went absolutely freaking crazy at many times in many showings, either right when it started, during the middle of the fight, and then certainly right at the very end of it. But
well, I remember saying we're really gonna, like I said, we're really gonna do this. We're gonna do this. Like I'm so used to the puppet in my head, and now here we go. We're gonna show that he was a great warrior. I'm like, well, I'm thinking to myself, well, all right, George, you're really forcing this great warrior thing really now. And I remember watching, I don't know, some kind of behind the scenes or it was on TV or whatever, and he was talking about it. So like, I was nervous about this not working and becoming silly. And thankfully, it played out very well.
I don't think it was silly at all.
No, especially with him yelling and flying around and everything. And of course, we get a bit of a foreshadowing, and I should have picked it up before, is when Anakin says, rival Master Yoda in lightsaber, combat or whatever he says there. And Obi-Wan says, "Only in your mind, my young." That was a cheesy line, Sure. But that was foreshadowing, and it went right over my head at the time. I wasn't even thinking that. I'm like, because how are they going to do that? But they did. And and it was a great moment. It was fun. I remember enjoying it. And it was just great to see the two of them like, oh well, apparently it's not going to be done by the Force, and then we're going to break out the lightsabers. I was like, ooh,
Yeah,
but
right.
I wanted
What does this look like?
yeah, but I wanted more the opposite, like with the Force and manipulating the Force and all that. But you couldn't really do that. It's not going to sell that well.
Yeah.
On the screen, so that worked out really well though.
Yeah, I would. And in that moment, we also get one other thing too. That, so not only did we got a sense of his power around telekinesis, we got a sense of his lightsaber prowess and how well he was able to fight with a lightsaber, which nobody was expecting.
Yeah.
Because they did keep that under wraps. Like that was a big reveal, big secret that was kept under wraps the entire time. The him absorbing the Force lightning.
Yes.
You're right. That had that in that particular scene, there's two big moments. One, he absorbs the power, which everybody's like, "Woo, wow!"
And then he
but the other one, yeah,
did he throw it?
no, I think he just absorbs it. I think that's what what's his name, Sidious. But the other big moment in that scene there is where he says, "You fought well, my young Padawan."
Yeah.
I mean, that was like a what? Are you kidding me? He was. You mean that's that in the conversations from there were many. After the movie, just thinking about trying to wrap your brain around the fact that Yoda had a Padawan and that was Dooku, and what did that look like? What was that like? And we got to finally see that in Dooku Jedi Lost to some extent, but that was just another flooring moment for me, at least, I guess, knowing what we had known at that point of who Dooku was and who we thought Yoda was and that kind of thing. So it was a great little Easter egg there.
Yes.
But anyways, that battle was all three of those battles I think were great in their own right. And then lastly, I guess before we get into the scene analysis, just the Anakin and Padme wedding. I had this down as a highlight, right? It's the forbidden love. It's a very traditional kind of trope in movie telling, right?
Yep.
Romeo Juliet, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I thought it was shot. I mean, the way it was filmed, the scene itself was gorgeous. The lighting, the costumes, the set, all that was really done really well. And I forget where they did it. They filmed that somewhere in Spain or Italy. Yeah, Italy.
Italy, I believe. Yeah.
But it all felt like it was just great. I really loved all of that. And to end the movie on that note, right, is one of the final things. It wasn't the only thing, but one of the final things that we saw going into Revenge of the Sith was his hand. But just the setting and the way that was set, I thought it set up Revenge of the Sith really, really well. So I will give it credit to that extent. This movie get credit in that it did a really great job of setting up Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the scenes, and let me ask you to go first because I know we've kind of poked and prodded at yours, but you had a couple of things in here, and I think it all revolves around Slave One, Jango Fett, that whole thing. But go ahead, take it away.
Well, first I'll start with the interaction with Jango and Obi-Wan. I thought it was great, and looking back and you see Tamara Morrison he's a pretty good actor. When I look at, I'm like, you know what? It's funny because then when you and it's funny because I think the Norse Legion posted something the other day that I thought was funny. I wasn't even thinking of that. It said, and it goes back to my conversation I had about when we were talking about what we wanted to see at the finale of the Clone Wars. And it says, what if he's actually not going to be Rex or Boba Fett? He's going to be Cody. And I was like, yes, because I would love to see what the fallout is. But anyway. Enough about that. But I thought the exchange was interesting. And then, of course, we got the exchange of how the clones became, who he talked to and all that, and that mystery that was behind that. I'm like, ooh, so there's a bit of mystery there. And then, of course, you got Boba Fett was introduced, and we were all like, I was like, oh, really? We got this little kid, we get to see what he was because they'd said it, when they were walking and he's showing the clones. It's like, oh, well, Boba's with him, So it was really cool to finally see this because this is a character that I grew up loving. It was mysterious, and I know everyone says blah blah, he's he doesn't do anything or whatever, and I get that, but it was really great. And then of course the fight happens, and that was really cool because it was more of a mano a mano kind of a physical fight. It wasn't so much blasters and lightsabers that much. You saw a little bit of that, but it was more of like a battle of the wits, and you got a bit of that. Not that they're Mandalorians, Jango and Boba, but you got that kind of Jedi versus Mandalorian kind of stuff going on there, or at least the seeds of it of what George was going to tell later on down the line, which was really awesome. And of course, then we get into the Slave One, which is my favorite Star Wars ship of all time. I don't care what anyone says; it's my favorite ship. It sounds awesome, and to see that happening, doing its thing, chasing Obi-Wan down, and the seismic charges is like one of my favorite scenes of all time. That sound is awesome. Far better than the Last Jedi thing with the Holdo maneuver. This thing was awesome. I mean, now talk about suspending your belief, Albert. You have to suspend your belief because this could not happen in space like this.
Sure.
With the sound
With
and
no
everything.
sound.
But it was awesome. And then of course you see Obi-Wan do the little thing, and then Boba Fett, does it later on with the garbage and stuff. So it was really cool. I thought it was awesome. I love those moments. And last week I was a little more in depth with my my moment. Here it's more because this movie was more about fun to me. Once you
Yeah.
get over it's like a CSI episode. It's fun. You see there's great moments like this, like you mentioned the fights, the Battle of Geonosis. Then you get this. There's a lot of good moments. It's almost like episode 1. There's a lot of other good moments in episode 1 too, when you kind of just get get past the stuff that you get hung up on.
Right.
It's enjoyable, and that's
Absolutely.
what this is here. And this is these are my moments. This is Slave One, Boba Fett, Jango Fett, and Jango is pretty cool. I remember seeing him, and I remember when he shoots the dot and he takes off, and I'm like, "Ooh, was that Boba Fett? What's going on there? What's the deal here?" And all that mystery happened. So it was pretty cool. I thought it was awesome that the mystery was like Jango and hunting him down and seeing what all this leads to, and it was done pretty well, I thought. So that's really mine. It's a light and airy one this week. Maybe next week it'll be more in depth. I don't know.
Well,
We'll see.
so a couple things there. So Slave One in the original trilogy was not that big of a deal. It was a cool ship. It was actually my favorite ship, and still is my favorite ship.
Should
Well,
be.
no, it's my second.
No, you're gonna
favorite.
go with the Ghost.
The Ghost is my number one, but it's a very close second. It's a close second, Slave One, because it was one of the few toys I got back when Empire Strikes Back came out. I remember getting that either for my birthday or Christmas. I don't remember which, but having that toy was just awesome because all I wanted really was Solo Frozen in Carbonite.
Yeah,
but,
me too.
But Slave
Only
One,
Solo.
there are only a few. There are only a few, in my opinion, ships that actually have personalities, right? That we talk about, and Millennium Falcon is the biggest one, right? That's almost a character in itself. But Slave One to me is a character in itself, and it really didn't become that for me until this movie because we got to see so many cool things about it that we didn't know it existed, right? Everything from why are we pulling up the beard? Everything from we're not going to
keep talking.
We're not
just keep talking. That's
okay.
that's for Jonesy. Just keep talking.
All right. So, jeez, Slave One. The sound effects of its guns, how fast it fired, the rapid fire was awesome. The seismic charges, right, is still one of the greatest sounds. If you talk about, I think we did a show one time we were talking about our favorite sounds. I think Jonesy and I, and this definitely came up as one of our favorites, if not the favorite sound effect of next to probably something like the lightsaber, right?
Yeah.
But it is a very iconic sound in the visually as well. That was pretty amazing. But there's still nothing that beats the experience of being in a theater during Attack of the Clones when it came out and hearing the seismic charge. Because you don't hear it so much unless you've got a great sound system. You don't really hear it. But there is a huge, huge thunderous boom that happens that shakes. They did this intentionally, but it's so powerful that you can feel it in your chest. Even it's been amplified for this particular scene. And it happens several times in the theater. So, you walk out of there and it's very similar to, like, I think about like Jurassic Park and the T-Rex, and you hear the pounding of the foot.
Yeah.
That same kind of thing, right? It just stays with you. It sticks with you. So, yeah, I agree. The seismic charges were awesome. Jango Fett as a character, yeah, agreed. We didn't even touch on the outlaw cowboy thing when he pulls out the gun, fires a couple rounds on that poor Jedi, I forget who is it, he kills right there on the battle, before the Battle of Geonosis. And then he flips it and does the whole, cowboy thing and whirls it around and puts it back in his holster. That was awesome. And we don't really see much of that, in any of the movies, really. Hopefully we get some of that in The Mandalorian. That'd be great to see a return to something like that.
Yeah, I was actually expecting that at some point to see the spinning of the thing and putting it in. And I hope we do get that at some point. I don't know, maybe one of the new characters will get that. I can't remember if Cad Bane did it.
Oh, yeah, he probably, I think he did.
I want to say he did. I just can't remember if he did or not.
He's got if he doesn't do that, at least the way he carries his pistols and the way he carries his shot is similar to what we would expect like a cowboy.
Yeah, he kind of has that laid back kind of,
gunslinger,
whatever. Yeah, gunslinger kind of move.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So,
and then lastly, just to touch on that Jango Obi-Wan fight. So that was one that we talked about it as a great fight, and the only thing I wanted to add to it that I didn't earlier on was I don't remember where we were, at this time in terms of what we knew about the Mandalorians versus Jedi. I think we knew there was some history there, whether that
Yeah,
came
the
up
old
in
EU stuff. Yeah, it
yeah, and I
wasn't.
don't. I'm trying to remember like where it stemmed from. Maybe it was Lucas. Maybe it was that. Maybe I don't know. But I know going into this movie, I had some kind of preconceived notion that these guys didn't like each other, and so finally
Yeah,
getting to see them go against each other because I always wondered like how does the Mandalorian even how does anybody
defeat
stack
a
up against
Jedi.
a Jedi?
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
you'd
think
only
they did a
think only
really
the Sith would do that, right?
sure.
But yeah,
But I think they did a really good job of explaining why, because of all the gadgetry, because of just the fierceness of the Mandalorians and how well trained they are, how agile they are. I mean, yeah, they didn't have the Force in them, but they were true warriors and could hold their own, right,
yeah,
against Jedi. And I think they did a good job of showing us that is possible, right? That the Jedi
yeah.
were not fallible, that they were fallible, I should say, and that they could fall. Which I thought was great. So yeah, I would agree. That was one of the greater moments in this movie for sure.
Hmm.
So I need about 30 minutes to talk about my scene analysis. So
Oh boy. Oh geez.
all right, so
Listen,
I've got
I'm very sleepy here, Albert.
we'll
So let's
start drinking your Death Wish coffee there.
I'm already out. That's the problem. It's not that much of a can. But anyway, I got a
So
little left.
I've got three things. I want to talk about Anakin's solo mission. I want to talk about Palpatine's manipulation, and then something I call "blinded by the light," which is kind of a play on words of "blinded by
Oh
the"
my God!
or
Now
"blinded by the dark."
that's
Sorry,
that
not
song
the
is in my
song.
head. The song is in my head.
No,
Which
"blinded
everyone
by
gets
the dark."
wrong, by the way. It's not. Anyway, we'll save that for EGM Roundtable.
Sure.
This is not for this. Go ahead, sir.
So let's talk about Anakin's solo mission. And what I want to go to is a quote. The quotes where, or it's early on in the movie. Obi-Wan Kenobi is walking with Mace Windu, and they're in
Oh,
the
yeah,
Jedi
yeah.
Temple, and
The arrogance.
Yoda
Yeah.
is right behind him, right? Yeah, and Obi-Wan brings it up. He says, "I'm concerned about my Padawan. He's not ready to be given this assignment on his own yet." And then the next line is, "The Council is confident in his decision, Obi-Wan. The boy has exceptional skills." And
Yeah.
then he responds back, "But he's still much to learn, Master. His abilities have made him more, well, arrogant." And then Yoda says, "Yes, yes. A flaw more and more common among Jedi. Too sure of themselves they are. Even the older, more experienced ones."
That was
And
him
Yoda,
slapping Mace in the face there. That's what that was.
yeah, I mean, Yoda, I think he's doing it to both, really. I think
Yeah.
because Obi-Wan, I'm not going to say he's arrogant, but he's definitely got a swagger to him,
times.
right? At times
Uh,
he can be.
Yeah. He's a little
He can be
overconfident.
pretentious,
Yeah.
overconfident, pretentious. Sure, he's all those things, and we love him for all those things. But
Yeah.
is Yoda really kind of slapping around, Mace Windu? He's slapping around Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that's what you would expect somebody like
Or
somebody
is it
like
more the Jedi Order?
sure,
You know
but you would,
what I mean?
but yes,
Yeah.
but I'm saying
ahead.
I think
Sorry.
you would expect somebody like Yoda in his position of power to ensure that people don't get too far ahead of themselves, right? He needs to ground them anytime he feels like they're starting to kind of stretch out a little bit too far from what they're start losing their ways.
Yeah.
But the problem is there's some irony and I guess there's some contradiction because later on, when Yoda is standing there, and this is right after Anakin has killed the Sand People, and we can hear the screaming and the voices, and you're Qui-Gon Jinn saying, "Anakin, Anakin, no."
No. Yeah.
Mace walks in and sees Yoda there meditating, and says, "What is it?" He opens his eyes, and his eyes are watery, which again is great, given they did that with the CGI. I don't know that you could do that with the puppet. Maybe you could, but he says, "Pain, suffering, death. I feel." In that moment, you hear very, very faintly. You hear the very first time we hear the Imperial March playing in the background. Dun 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 dun. It plays very so softly in that moment, which kind of is really a big dead giveaway that that was the beginning of Darth Vader. It was the beginning of Anakin's turn to the dark side.
Mhm.
And Anakin or Yoda says something terrible has happened. Young Skywalker is in pain, terrible pain. And all that on the surface is kind of self-explanatory. Where I want to take it back to the original quote is, to me, it does feel like, Yoda made this decision to send him out and be on his own because of his skills, and the council weighed in on this. It sounded like Yoda was definitely in favor of it. And I don't know, it kind of almost speaks to his arrogance as well, like Yoda's arrogance of, I know what's right here and I know what's best for him, and that's to go on this solo mission. I argue that had Obi-Wan been with him, like, to me, it always felt like Obi-Wan was what kept him in check. And this was the first
Yeah.
time Obi-Wan was not around, and Obi-Wan was not there to keep him in check, not there to ground him. As conflicting as their relationship is, and we get to hear Anakin talk about this in this
They're a good
movie.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah, they were a good balance. And the minute you pulled Obi-Wan out of that, it allowed Anakin to kind of go and do things on his own, which really wasn't a good thing. It speaks to exactly what Obi-Wan was saying. He's not ready. He wasn't ready for this.
Yeah.
He does need somebody there, whether that was Qui-Gon Jinn or whether that was a Obi-Wan Kenobi, anybody that had more experience, more wisdom, more maturity.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. He really needed somebody like that, and because he didn't have it, this is what led him. This is what led him down the path of the dark side, because he goes out and does something that he should not have done. And we see this a little bit later too. Like, we get to see the check and balance again later on when Padme falls out of the ship.
Yeah.
Right? He wants to immediately do what he wants to do and go save her. And Obi-Wan immediately says, "Stop. You cannot do this. You got to remember what he finally gets to him by saying, what would Padme do?
Yeah.
She would follow her orders. She would do her duty, that kind of thing. But he's that consciousness that Anakin didn't have. And that's what really kind of felt. So this all I'm saying is this all kind of stems from, I think, in some part, to the Council's arrogance and to Yoda's arrogance in not heeding what Obi-Wan had to say and allowing Anakin to go on his own and do his own mission when he really truly wasn't ready. Right?
True.
They were too blind, too arrogant to listen to Obi-Wan, and here's what we got.
Well,
All right, so that's
my other question while you're bringing this up is with this, we never get the fallout of that. We know Yoda feels the pain, and he talks to Mace about it, but it's never. And this seems to be a thing with the Jedi when it comes to Anakin. They know something happened, but then they ignore it, and it's kind of like with Obi-Wan, with Anakin. Was it season 5? I can't remember what season was of the Clone Wars, where they're in his room and Anakin's upset. Like, they're in the Jedi Temple, he's in his room, and Obi-Wan was giving him that out to, like, say something about Padme or whatever, and Obi-Wan had that, and Anakin was kind of waiting for him to say something to him, but they never did. It was like that unwritten thing. Like, there's this little wall between them, and they don't want to break through and kind of resolve all those issues. They kind of just ignore the elephant in the room, really.
Yeah.
So they never resolved that. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, if it played into your whole thing there.
Yeah, it's easy for me, as much as I don't want to do it, it's easy for me to kind of dismiss it as, they probably had a conversation about it. Anakin, I would expect, when he was confronted by the Council, confronted by Obi-Wan, confronted by Mace, Yoda, whoever, hey, what happened? We know you went through a lot of pain. Well, guys, my mom died. Right?
But
the
see,
pain
he tells Palpatine, but does he tell them?
No, I don't think he tells them. I don't think they know. I don't think they knew. They probably think he's not telling the truth and not being completely hopeful in the truth.
Yeah.
But I don't think they have a sense that he actually did that, because I think things would have been way different had he said, "Oh yeah, I went and murdered a bunch of people, women, children, the whole thing, and I'm good, fine now." I think they would have done something more.
I'm good. I'm good.
Exactly,
We're good
right.
now. I'm good. I'm great.
But I think Anakin would have hit it. I think he would have chalked it up to. I think he tells Padme, right? He confides in her.
Yeah. But Padme wouldn't. Well, she wouldn't tell Obi-Wan either.
No, she went against Obi-Wan. She went against she don't care about the Council. She told him, like, screw that. We're not staying here. We're going to go.
But I think she has an affection for Obi-Wan, though. I think she has.
No, yeah, I do. I agree.
Yeah, like,
because it was her decision. Remember, it was her choice. It was her idea to go
get Obi. Yeah,
Anakin was like, Council, we're going to go rescue.
He can die. Obi-Wan. I don't care. That was Anakin's mood. Like, yeah, whatever. Which was odd. I always thought that was odd that, like, he was like, well, whatever. I don't care. Well, of course, he was upset because he thought he was being held back. But anyway, continue, sir.
All right. So the other two that I have here is Palpatine's manipulation, and this is classic Palpatine. This is not the only instance, but I think it was something for me, at least. It was many viewings in several years ago that this kind of really hit me, and really speaks to. We talk about Palpatine and how manipulative he is, and how he can, the power of suggestion is something I think he plays up really well. But there's a moment early on, and it's he's talking to, it's just Palpatine and Anakin, and he says, I've said it many times, you are the most gifted Jedi I've ever met. I see you becoming the greatest of all Jedi, Anakin, even more powerful than Master Yoda. And it's one of those lines that it's like, oh yeah, right, I can see what he's doing here, but it didn't really hit me again until later on. And where this comes back up again is right after he kills the Sand People, and he's in that room, and he's talking to Padme, and he's telling her, finally confessing about what he did, or I guess right before he
Yeah.
did what he did, but he's kind of lamenting about what had happened with his mom and all that, and he says, "Why did she have to die? Why couldn't I save her? I know I could have." And
Mm.
that right there, that line itself is kind of a lot of problems there, right? We know this is what eventually becomes the death of him, and really eats up at him, and kind of gives him his direction, gives him his motive, kind of sets his compass wherever that may be. That's what he's been focused on, is in saving Padme's life, and later in the next movie. But he says sometimes, and then she responds back, "Sometimes there are things no one can fix. You're not all powerful, Annie." And
Should be.
just like right then, he immediately says, in not so many words, in very different words, what Palpatine had already told him. He says, "Well, I should be." He says, "Someday I will be. I will be the most powerful Jedi ever. I promise you. I will even
Yeah.
learn to stop people from dying." And it's like, part of me believes that this is truly him. This is what he wants, right? But because he's been manipulated by Palpatine, because the suggestion has already been planted in his
seeds, yeah.
head, the seed's been planted in his head. Yeah, he's now speaking these words, like he's thinking in his own will that this is what he needs to do. This is what he's going to become, and doesn't realize that he's been played here. And obviously Palpatine takes super advantage of this, of course, later on in the next
Of
movie.
course, yeah.
And then he has a moment there though where he kind of almost resets, because she comes back and says, it was a little bit later, Padme says it, to be angry is to be human.
Yeah.
And he says, "I'm a Jedi, I know better than this."
Yeah.
And which is, he's like, okay, maybe he's gotten over it, and it was a moment there where he lost himself. But remember, at this point, I think he's already down the path. I mean, it's forever dominating his destiny, right? To quote Yoda. And then not only does he promise that he's going to be the most powerful Jedi to Padme, which
His mom.
he comes back and
dead.
does it again to his mom. Yeah, he's sitting there, when in her grave, and says, "I wasn't strong enough to save you, Mom. I wasn't strong enough, but I promise
Yeah.
I won't fall. I won't fail again."
Yeah.
Right. So he's making a commitment to the two people that we talked earlier about him. The two people that expressed love
to
for him.
Yep. Yep.
He's now promising them, and then that promise is based on out of love. It's based on his heart. It's based on what he wants for these people. He wants to do better by them, and he's doing it the wrong way. But he's promising that he is going to be more powerful than anybody else, and he is going to be able to stop people from dying. So again, all that's accredited to Palpatine, and it's just not that one liner. I mean, there's probably many
Oh,
moments where he said that
yeah.
to him before that we didn't see off screen.
Yeah, it's also a reverse of Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan, because Qui-Gon essentially says the same thing in the Phantom Menace. I foresee you being a great Jedi or whatever, and and a wiser man than me, and all that other stuff.
Yeah,
Kind of the same thing. It's just a darker.
where it's coming from, right? It's coming from a
Yeah.
different place.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Which is interesting, because
it is interesting, and Anakin can't distinguish the two. He doesn't know. He can't
Yeah,
separate the two. He thinks
That's
it's all
what I mean,
coming from a
like,
genuine place.
like if Qui-Gon had said this to Anakin, what he said to Obi-Wan, that would have been an interesting way of things. Of course, you got the interaction on Mortis. Of course, was that whole debate if it really is him or if it's not, but we won't get into that here.
Yeah,
I was wondering if Anakin actually heard him say, Anakin, no, during that moment.
if
And, like,
Qui-Gon
Anakin-
or if Yoda heard that,
No, if Anakin heard Qui-Gon saying it, like
Oh.
you know how Yoda hears no, Anakin. I always wondered if Qui-Gon was trying to obviously was trying to communicate with him, but I'm wondering if Anakin heard it himself but didn't know how to figure that out. Like, I thought I heard Qui-Gon, but what the hell was that? And kind of just went on in his slaughter fest anyway. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting that we heard that, but we didn't get anything resolved of that at all with Qui-Gon, other than Mortis or whatever. But
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
certainly comes up a little bit later. I always heard that line as Yoda hearing that, because I think at this point he's starting to become more in tune with
it's
Qui-Gon, right? He's eventually going to commune with him, not much longer. He'll start communing with him. Excuse me. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't, and I like the idea that Anakin heard him. Yeah, what he would have done with that, and would he have been able to recognize that as being Qui-Gon's voice 10 years later, and assuming he had never had any other kind of, never heard that voice before, I don't know that he would have recognized the voice. But I think it would have been shocking for him to hear somebody tell him to stop or tell him no after he was about to do it. Like, yeah, like what's going on here?
it would have
kind of
been
thing.
interesting if we got, I don't know if they could do it in a comic where he kind of has this flashback at this moment, trying to process of hearing what he heard, and kind of like, was that Qui-Gon? Was that not Qui? Because it plays into Mortis too. Where, Anakin's like, well, the chosen one's just a myth,
Yeah.
and then he goes through his trials, so to speak, to be proven that he is the chosen one. And of course, he goes through with the seeing Qui-Gon go into the the whole thing there and stuff. So I don't know. It'd be interesting, and they never resolved that either off
Sure.
screen either. We never got to deal with that either. But anyway, continue, sir.
All right, the last one I have, and I'll try to keep this short. But so I call this "Blinded by the Dark," and it really is in this movie. We get more of what we saw in the Phantom Menace, in that the Jedi did not see the Sith coming. Right, the Shroud of Darkness is so thick and has been so thick for so long that they didn't see the Sith rise again, and they can't see what's obviously very much in front of them. And they were talking about it. It's so crazy. It's painful to watch Attack of the Clones and see Mace Windu and Yoda talking about what Dooku has told them, that the Dark Lord is now taking over the Senate. I mean, it's like, wow, who else could this be? You just put this guy in as Supreme Chancellor, gave him full authority to do whatever he wants to because of war, and they're not able to connect the dots, right? And some of that is I'm chalking that up to that's just the Shroud of the dark side, right? Palpatine is just so slick that the obvious is not obvious.
I think what they kind of interpret that as is, okay, Sidious is kind of being maybe manipulated by whoever this is.
Mm-hmm.
And they think Sidious is, not Sidious, but Palpatine at first is maybe just a puppet and doesn't realize it. And then as we go further on, they get more suspicious of him, especially Mace. I think Mace was kind of like, you are that dude. I know you are.
Right.
And then Anakin confesses to him. He's like, well, whatever came true. He kind of says it right there. Like, then it came true. And I think at the end there, he's like, all right, well, yeah, this is, but it's almost like with Anakin, how does Anakin not put two and two together that that's who it is? At the opera scene alone, I mean, for God's sakes, it should just be like, oh, you're telling me about Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Right. Yeah, well, save that because we're going to talk about that one in the next show.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah,
because that one I do.
I'm just saying it's obvious, but that's how evil works, though. Evil is always like, it creeps up, and then when you see it, you're like, well, obviously, why didn't we? Yeah. Why didn't we see this coming? And it's too late because you just ignored it and you kind of just thought, oh no, maybe he's being manipulated. When truth is, they were really in charge all along, and that's just the way it is. So
right,
I don't know.
Right,
interesting though.
So here, and that's actually I haven't even started yet. Okay, so the Blinded by the Dark,
another 40 minutes.
No, this will be like 10. But the piece that I'm talking about is there's a scene in here where he says, "Blind we are, if creation of this clone army we could not see." Right, this is Yoda talking to Mace. And then Mace says, I think it's time we inform the Senate that our ability to use the Force has diminished. Okay, so pause. You've got somebody like Mace Windu, I mean, literally saying, we suck. We've got to let people know about this, right? We're not in tune with the Force like we used to be. And
but
as much
Yoda
as we give
here, though. Yeah, go ahead.
As much grief as we give the Jedi Council for not being self-aware enough to what's going on, at least Mace Windu says it, even though they don't follow through it, because he gets shut down. Yoda comes back and says, only the Dark Lord of the Sith knows of our weakness. Now, how they got that right, I don't know, but because I mean, they already know there's a Dark Lord because of the conversation that they had. This is a continuation of the conversation they had at the very end of the Phantom Menace, right? Yeah. Always two there are, a master and apprentice, with which we kill. This is a continuation of that conversation. So now he's talking about, well, look, only the Dark Lord of the Sith, the leader, knows of our weakness, right? That we weren't able to see that this clone army was just suddenly built behind for the last 10 years without our knowledge, or even longer, however, after Sifo-Dyas died, right? But then he says, if informed the Senate is, multiply our adversaries will. And he's not wrong. Right. I agree. He's not wrong. We don't, but it does pose a lot of questions. Like, I really wonder how many other groups are wanting and vying for the death of the Jedi. And had they had this information that they're now blinded to some extent, and they're not as sensitive to what's going on as they could have been or should be, that I think it would open themselves up to a lot of people trying to take advantage of them or attack them or wipe them out or whatever it may be. So I get he's doing it. I get why he says it, and I get why he's writing into it. But it just bothers me that they don't go back and have a council with the other group. And maybe they do. Maybe I'm not maybe I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt, but it seems like at that point they should have called together the Jedi Order, the High Council, and said, "Look, here's what's going on. Let's take this to a vote." But there's so many other things that it always feels like Yoda has the final say. And then going back to the arrogance piece that I talked about earlier, he's making these unilateral decisions like, nope, sorry, we're not going to do this. We're not going to say this right now. And I know what's best. And this, again, is probably something that you could argue bites him in the butt later on. And I've got 2 more quotes, but go ahead. I want to get I know you're trying to get a thought in it.
Well, because I think it's more of a political adversarial type of thing and not so much like Sith Jedi verse type thing. I think it's Yoda. It kind of goes to the what Palpatine says. The Sith and the Jedi are almost the same. They're all afraid to lose power. And I think this was Yoda kind of saying, well, wait a minute. If we do say something, we're going to lose our political power, so to speak, in the Senate and in the galaxy. So maybe we should just keep quiet. And I think that it's more of a political thing. I don't think it's so much like, like Jedi versus Sith type thing. That's how I took that one. But, but continue.
So I can see it both ways. I took it as people are out, they're going to kill us, so we're going to be wiped out. And this is about self-preservation at this point, right? We cannot let people know or think that we are weak or that we're blinded or we're incapable of doing what we've done for thousands. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And that's, I don't know, it does speak to arrogance to some extent, if that's truly the case. But the last 2 lines are parallel lines said by 2 different people, right? You've got Dooku, who finally shows up with Sidious at the very end, which I thought was a really, really cool scene, although there's not much that happens there. But Dooku tells him the wars have begun.
Yeah.
And Palpatine says, "Excellent." And then later on, back to this other scene, you have the line of the shroud of the dark side has fallen, begun the Clone Wars has. So you've got 2 different people for different reasons announcing, realizing, coming to terms with the fact that this war has started. One is saying it because everything is going as planned, whether it be by their own actions or because they foresaw this and are taking action on that, which is probably what Palpatine was doing, knowing what we know about him in terms of how much he's able to, how much he really truly relies on foresight, right? And his arrogance, or his confidence. And then on the other end, the opposite end, you've got somebody like Yoda who, does not
baffled.
want this.
Yeah.
What's that?
He's baffled. He doesn't know.
Yeah, he's completely dumbstruck.
But he accepts it though. He accepts it, but he knows it's a grave thing because he says it's not a victory, Obi-Wan.
Right.
This is going to lead to a darker path. We just don't see it yet, and he doesn't know which way this is going to go. Which way the wind's going to blow. He just knows it's bad overall. Obi-Wan's
no,
like,
I agree.
Yeah, hey, we won, but no, that's not really. We didn't win.
Yeah, I don't think any of them.
What he says to Luke though. War does not make one great.
Yeah,
because even he knows. Maybe it's kind of clicking in his head now. But continue. I don't mean.
No. The last thing I was going to say is I just don't know that any of them had any idea that the Clone Wars would go on as long as it did, right? And he makes this, and then this is so petty of me, but he says begun the Clone War has, and we've always talked about it as the Clone Wars, and so I don't know if that was intentional or not. My gut tells me that it probably speaks to them just not thinking that this is one war, right? It just started.
Yeah,
it'll be over in a few months, and we know that's not the case. I mean, it went on for years or several.
And then as Bo-Katan says, "What's one more?"
Exactly. What's one more war? You fought so many over the course of this.
Yeah.
But yeah. So again, all of that was really everybody was blinded by the darkness. These particular sets of quotes and scenes really kind of play up and kind of are a continuation of what we saw in the Phantom Menace. From the Sith rising. Certainly to the conversation that Mace and Yoda were having at the very end there. And, we get even more of it a little bit later here in the next movie as well. So we'll be hitting on that once we get to Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
All right. So I did it in 23 and not 30. So apologies there.
Not too bad. Okay.
That's all we got, folks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next. No.
No, we got one little thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the end of the main show. We got one small thing before we end this sucker. We did get another 5-star review on iTunes. So thank you so much. This comes from.
Thank you.
Good Mistad RC3.
I'm glad you said it and not me because
that's you.
We know I'm horrible.
It says this is a great show, and then it says in quotes, even better with Jonesy, and I mean that add Jonesy way, not remove Mike. So I think he wants you on the show still, Mike. So don't fret.
No.
He says,
I should be removed.
He or she
ASAP.
says, I really enjoy how the show goes deep into their topics and takes what they are saying seriously. Easily one of my top 5 shows. I'll take
Okay.
top 5. I'll take number 5. We can be 5. I don't need to be number
No,
1.
I want to be number 1. I'm a
Okay.
very competitive guy. I want to be number 1, but
I'm
no,
a little bit more reserved.
Yeah, I'm not when it comes to podcasting like this. No, no. Truthfully, there's a lot of great shows, and so to be among them is great. So, but anyway, I am competitive, but in a good way, just to improve. But to improve is to get me off the show permanently. That would be a good thing for everybody, including my sanity. But I do enjoy talking with you, Albert, and of course, I do love when the three of us get together. I do love talking Star Wars together. It's a fun time. So
Yeah. Well, thank
hopefully-
you, Good
hopefully
Mustad
that-
RC3,
yes,
for the feedback and the 5-star review.
yes, we appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to write that because you didn't have to.
You didn't have
So
to, and it helps.
Yes, it does. It boosts our ego for a day.
We are accepting all 4 and 5-star reviews. So you guys.
Oh no,
have-
come on! I love those 1 and 2-star reviews when they're picking on me. I love those. Those
Oh,
are great.
Yeah, yeah,
We've
especially
had a
when they
few of
pick on
those.
your accent. That's the best one.
Oh yeah, I love that one. I can't
It's like,
help
what did I have
it.
to do with that? That's
I-
not
you know,
me.
I
Come
know,
on.
I know. I feel this is why I bring down the show, Albert. I'm sorry. I feel bad, but that's just
All
the
right.
way it is. All right.
We're in overtime. Let's get out of here. We've got next one episode coming up, 328. We will be doing the very same thing with Revenge of the Sith. And oh my goodness, there's so much to talk about with Revenge of the Sith. I cannot wait. So that'll be
Yes.
out next week. All right. Any final words before we go?
I don't think so.
All right. Let's see if you get the right button. Oh, there
I
it is.
did.
You
See, and
did.
it's loud.
Awesome.
So you should hear it
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
later.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.